I'm
Awesome.
delighted to have Gabe on from Alkanes and Subfrost. Gabe, welcome. We've spent quite a few months working together
Yeah.
back in the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah.
Happy to have you on, and you're also coming back from a long China trip. So first off,
That's right.
introduce yourself and tell us about Alkanes, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So it's been a long time coming, Johann. I think we've been trying to schedule this for far too long. So I'm really happy we finally got the chance. Um, so my background, currently I'm the CEO of Subfrost, which is the lead maintainer of the Alkanes metaprotocol, which is a smart contract protocol built on Bitcoin L1. But further, Subfrost as a company is really focused on the programmability of Bitcoin across ecosystems, always on Bitcoin L1. I myself, my background prior to coming to Subfrost full time, I was sort of basically had a decade in management consulting, very much focused on financial services, process improvement stuff. Moved into more of the strategy side of work, and then towards the end there was a lot of like AI strategy, which was fun, but not quite as fun as founding Subfrost. That's for sure.
I bet I've been in the space. It was just the year went by really fast and it's an exciting space. I know Bitcoin's in a bit of a bear market right now. Um, but not for you. I think you've made actually some good traction in this bear. Um, can you disclose anything? Tell us what you're building now and what the next goals are?
Yeah. So, it is. We do. It does kind of feel like a diamond in the rough a little bit. I think like at a macro level, there's several things. I think primarily like media driven. That could be kind of considered bearish or working against Bitcoin. I could list those things off, but I don't think any of them hold long term. But meanwhile, when temperament's down and sentiment, I think across the board in crypto's down, we have seen some solid traction. So after a few years here, I mean, Subfrost was a side hustle of mine for a couple of years. My co-founder Flex, he's been working on it full time for longer than I have. But I've really been focused on like the market side of things, kind of the growth end and where our user base is. And come to find out that's actually in China primarily, and some of those Eastern countries. So I think it's really easy kind of you're located in Canada, I'm in the US. Like it's easy for us to be surrounded by people that are saying, hey, Michael Saylor, is having to delever and things like that. And we're really, everyone talks about Trump and his crypto opinions and things like that. And that brings a lot of volatility and drives a lot of sentiment one way or the other. And I don't think that's necessarily the case when you kind of go overseas and focus on the Asian markets. So like you mentioned, I did just get back from quite a long trip to Asia. But within that trip, we went to China and we road tripped mainland China and kind of visited several communities out there. Got to meet hundreds of people. It was honestly a wonderful trip. Blew our expectations in almost every way. And we will be returning for Bitcoin Asia at the end of August.
Very nice. The last time I saw you, you didn't have a buzz cut. Does that have anything to do with the Asia
It's
trip?
actually a man bun.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I'm
Okay, I
growing it
thought
out.
you got into martial arts or Tai Chi or something like that.
No, it's a man bun. I'm just waiting to. I'm from New England, and we're going up for a wedding next weekend. So I'm just waiting to kind of shock everyone that I know.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, sorry, not to just speaking of traction and whatnot. I think Alkanes in general, we've picked up a lot of steam in those Asia markets. Right now, even though Bitcoin activity, the disclaimers, Bitcoin activity as a whole is down from recent years. But within that activity, like just yesterday, or 2 days ago, Alkanes was 85% of all Bitcoin transactions. and over 50% of block space, which is things that even though we're in a bear market and activities are low, we are really proud of. And it feels like one of those situations where if we can gain this much traction when the price of Bitcoin is going down, we're all confident that the price does end up going back up. And with the price of Bitcoin going up, kind of the tides rise for all boats being built on it, right? So that's our focus right now.
I am going to ask a question that I feel like everybody wants to hear the answer to. So you're a decentralized custodian and you're in trustless DeFi. However, there are some multisigs that are needed for when you send BTC to Frost and so forth. Was the same type of issue that we had over at Biz for BRC20s. However, how trustless is or can you be on Bitcoin with a smart contract situation?
Great question. So we consider this, and I actually don't know if this term is official anywhere or if I just made it up, but progressive decentralization. So when you're starting a protocol here, like no one in the history of blockchain just went from like zero to like fully decentralized.
Right.
So with that, we kind of have split up our roadmap around the decentralization of the signer group into three sets. So the first phase is current. We currently have 9 signers, which actually is larger than a lot of other protocols, which a lot of people would be very surprised by. But currently we have 9 signers. As our Frost rules basically declare that as long as 6 of those 9 signers approve a transaction, that transaction goes through. Our next phase is we are going to essentially dox those signers and, as needed, move keys around to the 2 doxed entities. So right now, my identity is obviously public, so is Flex's, but the other signers, just for like security purposes and everything, are not doxed. Once we move into the second phase, everyone will be required to be doxed. And within that, within that phase, we are going to grow the signer set a bit. We're not exactly sure what number we'll end up landing on because as our TVL grows, it will demand kind of the signer set to grow as well. But then our third phase is when we actually, at this point, it'll utilize our protocol token, and this is where we completely turn the entire signer set permissionless, and it actually can scale up to 255 signers, which would be massive, and that number will start at whatever number we end at on phase 2. So let's call it 20 signers. As TVL grows and as the economics around it grow, then we can expand the signer set. But when you make everything completely permissionless and just anyone can run a node and they can be a signer themselves, you really need to make sure that the economic incentives are in place because that's really what drives. You kind of remove the personal identity part of the permissionless system and you replace it with economics. So that will be key before we transition into that third phase.
What is your TVL right now?
About 100 Bitcoin.
Wow, very congratulations.
Thank you.
The other question I have, something that plagued us over at BRC20 as well, was do you find that people misunderstand us or protocols like Subfrost as a L2?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
100%. Part of my job is to tell people about this, and it's consistently the L2 kind of backlash, and I do find that oftentimes that comes from people that aren't super familiar with the UTXO model or Bitcoin in general. We did find this as we were going around China and speaking to different oftentimes like executives of some of these larger companies to see if we can integrate or not. A lot of them just weren't super familiar with the UTXO model, considering it an L2 and whatnot. So I think our mission when it comes to spreading that word, it's really to just grow as organically as we possibly can and keep building really awesome products. And that's going to drive eyes onto, onto Subfrost, onto the Alkanes metaprotocol. And now you start getting more and more people looking into it and then discovering like, oh, actually, this is an L1. Like the sats never left Bitcoin.
Right.
Everything is completely traceable the entire time, just like a Bitcoin transaction. So yeah.
And how do you feel about creating so much spam on the Bitcoin network?
I don't care about the spam. Really. It's funny. I think like our transactions are extremely small. So a big kind of report came out. I forgot what the guy's name is, but he's one of like the BIP 110
Yeah.
guys and researchers, and he basically wrote like the conclusion was that like BIP 110 would stop or not stop, hinder people's like seamless, easy ability to deploy contracts. But there's workarounds and it won't stop the contract from working, or it won't stop transactions from interacting with that contract once it's already deployed. So like he said it himself, like, oh, we'll just take, they'll just take one contract and then they'll just split it up, and that makes it more difficult on the developer. But we are driven by the belief that the economics and the volumes and the user base is what drives developers to want to build in a certain ecosystem. And if they have to go through one more step or two more steps to make sure that their contracts are deployed properly, they're going to do that, even if it is more expensive. So I think really when you boil the entire thing down on the spam conversation, I do think it comes down to censorship, which I don't like, and therefore. I mean, at this point, all these meta protocols have built workarounds like BIP 110. I mean, ordinals, alkanes, we've all done it already. So like it wouldn't actually affect us. However, it is censorship, and that is a real thing that I do think we all sort of we should try hard to battle against.
It was a very, very interesting sort of like divergence of thought when you had Bitcoiners lobbying for censorship. It was weird.
I know it does. It really it doesn't make. I know, and like you have like the classic BIP 110ers, and like I'm not a pro on BIP 110. I mean, from my standpoint, I have so much capacity or so little capacity where I can look at my co-founder Flex, who's CTO, and I can say, hey, can we figure this out if BIP 110 were to pass? He says yes, and now I get to basically say, okay, I don't like censorship, and that's where I stand on the issue. But I'm not super technical when it comes to this. However, I was surprised that some bigger kind of Bitcoin devs or people that have been in the space did support BIP 110, and they weren't just those like the BIP 110 talking heads that I think a lot of people think are already maybe on the edge of a little crazy out there. I was surprised to see one or two people support it, but for the most part, and it could very well just be my algorithm and me being in the space I am, but no one that I am super close with like supports it.
What is your estimation of the total addressable market of a solution like Subfrost protocol? Like where I know what we thought it was. What is your estimate of it?
So quite literally like 90% of Bitcoin. So we say that because there's a few things that are already driving towards these numbers. Like for example, not driving towards these numbers, but that kind of back this argument. Like right now, a lot of Bitcoin isn't moving around as Bitcoin. It's moving around via ETFs and leveraged
Right.
products and perps and things like that. Um, what Subfrost basically does is we allow someone to put their Bitcoin in the protocol, and then it moves around as sats, but it doesn't move around as Bitcoin like a BIP 110 person would see it. It moves around as the protocol's Bitcoin, which on Alkanes it's called frBTC
Hmm.
in the contracts themselves. And it moves around in a far lighter weight version of that Bitcoin, and it's always redeemable for that same amount of Bitcoin. So
Hmm.
it actually makes utilizing Bitcoin a less expensive option. And I think if you look at that and then you look at the ETFs, I think they're actually similar in that the whole reason people use ETFs right now is because they're already in their brokerage accounts. It's already easy. These institutions are, whether they hold it but then it's just they're tossing paper around between traders and whatnot. We we want to make the assumption that institutions are going to they care most about security and they care second about ease of use and being able to actually utilize that Bitcoin in a productive way. So I think we move from having these institutions hold, Bitcoin and just traditional custody over to these institutions actually utilizing that Bitcoin in a way that's native to Bitcoin itself and not just like a levered product that they can earn a yield on, because that usually never um, aligns with their prospectus. Um, if Fidelity is holding Bitcoin, they're not they're not taking all of that Bitcoin and leveraging it and making yield on it on other sketchy leverage products. Their users have to believe that Fidelity is just holding their Bitcoin as kind of native Bitcoin. And I know there's all these paper financial instruments that kind of layer on top of it, but at the end of the day, they're still holding Bitcoin. And I think what we see is we see a move from that over to doing everything on chain. And I think
Right.
especially when you're dealing with not the large, well-respected American financial institutions, and instead you're dealing with um, just other institutions on Earth where a lot of people in the world don't have access to Fidelity or Bank of
Right.
America or Charles Schwab. Um, these people might not trust, their equivalent of their financial institution holding an ETF and custodying their Bitcoin properly, but they will trust being able to earn that same yield uh, on an on-chain product. And I do see a large move towards that, especially when it comes to non non-US institutions. But we
Okay.
hope US institutions as well.
From the amount of competitors that were in the space of the Subfrost protocol from BRC 2.0 and many more that came, runes, what I could say is that in my experience for a market like Bitcoin, which is obviously grew over the years, but some of these protocols started, in 2023. There have been so many competitors, and what that suggests to me was that there was a lot of people that believed that the total addressable market and the market need was there for a product like this. However, over the last couple of years, maybe the last year mostly, Bitcoin has taken more of an institutional sort of twist and turn, becoming more accepted, uh, being held and talked about by governments in the West. How has that changed this? How has it changed Bitcoin? And obviously, there's a movement for people because I think maybe I'm wrong, but Bitcoin is like a global resource. It's a sandbox for anybody to get involved, and protocols like yours make that happen. However, it feels like there's a tug of war. Am I right on that?
I think you're You make some good. There's some all those angles that you just provided are very relevant. I do think that there is a move to institutionalize a lot of like the custody and the ownership and how Bitcoin moves, how it moves, quote unquote. What I do think that does though is it was always difficult to get your mom and dad to self custody. It was always difficult to have, Aunt Jean and Uncle Scott self custody or interact with DeFi. And they were never holding Bitcoin. And I think we get to a point when we institutionalize these things that they can now say, okay, I actually like the idea, or I want some exposure to this. And I do think that is what I think when the institutions adopt Bitcoin and you have these large, very, very, very large ETFs at this point, I do think that opened up the world to it gave them access. And when I say world, I mean people that aren't necessarily incentivized to try to go out and self custody themselves,
Right.
which I do think is primarily a lot of these Western countries. Like my own parents, never going to hold Bitcoin on a ledger or on a Trezor or something like that, right? Now with an ETF, they might. So I actually think it's a good thing on that side. On the other side, though, I do think that it'll always, the chances of it getting to an extreme are very relevant. I think we have, shout out to Michael Saylor and shout out to everything he's been doing to spread the good word. But at the end of the day, he is using leverage to purchase a volatile asset. That's not a great, sustainable long-term strategy. And I think holders of Bitcoin we will be on the other end of that stick. I think like he has to sell some Bitcoin, and therefore price is going to take a little bit of a hit. However, if there's buyers on the other side, and I do think we're at a price where if there aren't enough buyers on the other side yet, it doesn't have to go that much further for us to completely absorb that impact. So on that side too, the institutions, Michael Saylor, what they do have is they have the marketing power. They spread the good word of Bitcoin, why it's important to drive their own interests, of course. But I do think generally it's a good thing. I think people then migrate to things like DeFi products. And that's if you just take like the micro example, when you compare it to like the ETFs now, but like you take the micro example of like the BlockFis and the Celsiuses before they went bankrupt, like those companies were really easy for people to start earning a yield on their Bitcoin. Then they went bankrupt. A lot of those people migrated to DeFi products. And Bitcoin's a bad example because Bitcoin at that time didn't have many, still doesn't have many yield-bearing options in DeFi. However, like USDT, like those people, if they lost their USDT, that sucks. But chances are they still they had USDT, they had crypto, and now they're at a way higher likelihood of owning that in a self-custody solution, or else they never really would have held USDT with Celsius to begin with if they didn't have an interest in crypto to begin with. Like I did get caught up in the Celsius bankruptcy. That sucked. But I just kind of coincidentally got out of BlockFi at the right time. And with BlockFi, it's not like I sold all that USDT for USD and then just like held it in my bank account again. The reason why I was investing my USDT in BlockFi was to earn a yield on USDT because it's a cool DeFi asset. Mm-hmm. Of course, they were CenFi, but it's not like I went back to USD. It's that I then moved forward with USDT. And same thing with Celsius. When I did get caught up in all that, then I still didn't just hold USD at the bank. I just self-custodied my USDT assets. And I do think that is, and that's why I think TradFi is a good thing for crypto in general.
You bring up a good point about self-custodying. is there a future where Zoomers and Gen Alpha and people of that younger generation mirror sort of like the boomers where they don't want to self custody and then Bitcoin becomes, I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's still going to be an asset of global impact. But self custodying is really the core culture of BTC. And I hate to say, but it doesn't seem to be a trend that's improving. It seems to be a trend that's going away.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. I do think what is improving is opportunities that incentivize people to self custody.
Okay.
And for example, like what we're doing at Subfrost, one of our products, dxBTC, that's going to be a liquid yield bearing Bitcoin asset. And our goal since the very beginning, when we first started conceptualizing dxBTC, this is always backed to Bitcoin. And we are not taking that Bitcoin and risking it anywhere. And we won't launch dxBTC until that is a 100% secured audited asset. And right now, people, their options are they can self custody their Bitcoin and it kind of sits in their ledger, their Trezor, whatever. Or in somewhat extreme cases, or not actually, they can take their, they can not self custody, they can hold it at a brokerage, and then they can pull margin against that. They can lever it up. They can I mean, the famous Elon Musk, he takes out loans against his portfolio. Like you can buy it, you can now put it up as collateral for a house. There's centralized products or TradFi products that are aiming to do those things, and they will earn market share by delivering utilization to Bitcoin holders. And even if those people don't think, even if those people aren't actually holding Bitcoin, they're just holding it on paper, it's enough of an incentive and it's enough utility that plus the ease of just holding it in your brokerage account, that's enough to have people make that decision. We're here fighting against that and saying, hey, I mean, never go from self custody to the brokerage account. I hope it's, I have no problem with more and more people that were never going to self custody to begin with buying Bitcoin in their brokerage
Yeah.
account. That's great. But our goal is to make it so everyone that currently is self custodying can utilize their Bitcoin in a productive way where they would never think they would never think ever that it would make sense for them to move that over to a brokerage or sell their Bitcoin and buy the ETF. At the end of the day, they need reason to self custody outside of security, unless they really are that kind of cyberpunk era, or just not a U.S. citizen or Canadian citizen. They actually are in a different country where those assets they really have to self custody,
Interesting.
or
Yeah.
they're subject to losing it.
What do you think about the volatility reduction? I mean, it's not a long enough timeline, but Bitcoin over its life cycle has had massive volatility. We haven't seen that in the last couple of years. People trade on volatility. They love volatility. Um, People become wealthy because of volatility. Uh, and now it doesn't seem like there is much volatility in Bitcoin. Or I'm absolutely totally wrong, and we're just up for another massive spike up to 300,000 or something like that. What are your thoughts?
That would be great. I hope you're wrong, and that's the spike, or the spike comes. Um, I do think it's a combination of just where we are right now in the market cycle. I do think some people are fatigued, and I also think, like we mentioned, I mean, at the beginning, when we kind of talked about the bear market very briefly, you do have some things working against Bitcoin. I don't think any of them are long lived, though. I mean, a lot of people, especially people that were skeptics in crypto, I mean, a, whether you're a Trumper or not a Trumper, you got hoodwinked if you thought Trump was out here to save crypto. That, never was going to happen. And unfortunately, what that's doing is a lot of these people think they're the people that didn't buy into it think they're geniuses because, oh yeah, I always knew crypto was a scam, but they're a Trumper to begin with. But anyway, I think there's massive kind of bear pressure from just everyone taking a step back and looking at this guy, not to get political, but just like you take any topic, it doesn't have to be Bitcoin, it doesn't have to be crypto, any topic this guy talks about, and you lose a lot of it's easy to lose conviction in what he's saying, right? And I think that traditionally that might drive some volatility, but I think what it actually does in Bitcoin's case is people decide to look elsewhere for that excitement. I think you see a lot of excitement in perps. Obviously, those have been going absolutely crazy recently with hyperliquid and whatnot. But then you also have completely different assets, like SpaceX and like the AI trades and things like that. So you do have a lot of the people that were driving a lot of the volatility were these traders that were in it for excitement. They were making a ton of money.
Yeah.
But a lot of those traders, there are other highly volatile swing assets that they can move into, and it's just better for them to trade those assets right now than Bitcoin. That's not to say they don't come back to Bitcoin. It's not to say that they don't come back to products that rely on Bitcoin. I think, I personally, I hope Bitcoin kind of average it over, over the next 50, 60 years of my life. I obviously, hope that ends up looking like a linear graph upward.
Mm-hmm.
But what I know for sure is that there's demand for assets on a blockchain as secure as Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I think if, none of those assets have really gotten to a point that has driven tremendously massive volume. Of course, Ordi, which is a BRC20, that did for a period of time. But it's still nothing in comparison to some of these other just major crypto assets. So I do think that Bitcoin as a blockchain, it's going to be around forever. It is the one that I will, guarantee my life savings on, that Bitcoin will not die. It will always be here. And I think the more products we can build on it, the better the ecosystem is going to be in general. And also it's if you're a developer and you're going to spend a year of your life building a cool product, maybe the next 10 years of your life, if it actually has teeth. Why would you build that on some sketchy L1, L2 that is going to have the same fate as all of the other sketchy L1s and L2s? Build it on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We all know Bitcoin's going to be around. We all know. When you release those contracts, they are forever on Bitcoin. Your protocol survives forever.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't you choose to do that? And at the end of the day, I think it's people don't realize it's an option.
Yeah.
When we went on our Chinese road trip, those people did not know there were any DeFi products on Bitcoin whatsoever, and they all held Bitcoin.
Right.
They were all Bitcoiners. So it just shows we're still in just such an early
Yeah.
age for programmability on Bitcoin.
Yeah, no, I drunk the Kool-Aid as well as and I think it's a really reliable Kool-Aid. I've been being in crypto since pretty early on, and seeing protocols come and go, L1s come and go. You really can depend on Bitcoin. And regarding the president of the United States, I was there in Nashville, and when he made the speech, and it was whether which side of the aisle you were on, it was still wild to see him at the conference. Having Bitcoin go mainstream in this cycle was not something that anybody who was early on ever thought would ever happen.
Never.
Right.
Never.
Exactly. And it's we've come to, yeah, he was, in it for the billions and stuff, but it's still I mean, he came to the party, and that was kind of cool. So I like that part of things.
I completely agree. And I mean, it's those three. Call them like non cyberpunk, not Bitcoin. I mean, actually, Michael Saylor is kind of he's pretty OG. But I guess what I meant by the kind of those three pillars of like they're sort of working against us from a media perspective. It's I mean like there's no larger media figure in the world than Trump. Then you have all of the institutional stuff, and then you have Michael Saylor, and
Yeah.
like none of those things are net bad for Bitcoin. All of
Right.
those things really have driven a lot of
Brand
trust in the
awareness.
asset and
Yeah.
randomness and marketing and like I think that's all
Yeah.
good for Bitcoin. I do think it makes it so those are the Satoshi era people
Yeah.
like they never expected this, and people are getting into Bitcoin now, not I think largely, especially if they're doing it through institutions, like it's not for the same reason. um but is it okay that they're getting into it? Yes, of course.
There's such passion in the Bitcoin ecosystem. I hope that does stay, um, with the amount of tourists that come, but also the OGs. But I think at the end of the day, it's what you've described. It's the censorship resistance. It's just the idea that you can have a self custody if you wanted to, and control your funds. I think that's what really appealed to the retail market, and I do hope that that continues. I want to talk and switch gears a little bit about
Sure.
uh, Alkanes had a hack, I would want to say, or maybe something that happened on July 2nd. Somebody attempted to drain the frBTC. Take me through that and talk about that war story and how you guys came through it.
I woke up to the craziest phone call messages from all of our Chinese friends that I ever would have expected to get in my life. Um, First and foremost, it was not a successful hack, and that wasn't by randomness or luck. That was because of the systems that we had set up in place. So I did just to
Nice.
be extremely clear on that. There's been so much speculation around it. They're like, oh, the Subfrost team woke up at the right time and stopped it all from happening, like at that exact block. It's like, of course we didn't do that. We were literally asleep when the hack was halted, which is exactly what you would want to happen
Yeah.
when there's a hack on your protocol. So basically, what had happened was there was a this guy. We've identified him and he's working with us. So we now
Oh,
know the backstory. He has spent basically months with like Opus, just like drilling and drilling and drilling. And in that process, he found one exploit which essentially allowed him to create an inconsistency within the index between like I think it had to do with like rolling back a transaction, and he was able to basically within one transaction call it like a quote unquote an accounting exploit. He was able to like mint like an unlimited amount of fake diesel, which is the Alkane's kind of largest asset right now by market cap, like in one transaction, like a million diesel. And then they were phantom diesel. So they never actually interacted with the diesel contract, which fortunately made the process of cleaning this all up super simple. But basically, creates all this phantom diesel, and then utilizing the open source AMM contracts that Subfrost hosts on our app, and that actually several other developers also host, like they're kind of shared liquidity pools. He was able to take the Phantom Diesel, trick the pool, and pull out all the frBTC. That's where everyone started freaking out. But it was like 4 or 5 a.m. our time, Eastern. So we're asleep. And our Chinese friends were like watching this happen in real time, but he underwent the whole process within like one block. And then when he went to unwrap, quote unquote, unwrap his frBTC into native Bitcoin, that's when Subfrost stopped it from happening, essentially.
Interesting.
The fortunate part is he thought he was rich when he got access to the frBTC and started bragging. And he started bragging in all of these Chinese WeChat groups. And that actually allowed us to identify who he was. And so that's what he gets. But essentially what happened was, Subfrost is highly complex. There are several different kinds of failsafes here. We never would have launched Subfrost without these failsafes, one of which did halt that transaction from happening. So the funny thing is that he went to basically swap his frBTC for BTC, and the transaction just stays in an unconfirmed state. So just like a lot of transactions, and that's something that we should probably work with like explorers to say like, hey, let's make a little mark here that says like, if it's confirmed, then Subfrost still has to release, because right now it just stayed permanently in an unconfirmed state.
Yeah, it should have an animated finger going like that.
Yeah, being like, not yet, not yet, not yet. And we had all of our friends basically looking at this like, our lives are going to be over when Subfrost is going to die. Everything's over when it confirms, but obviously it never confirmed, and therefore he never got native Bitcoin, never made it back to native Bitcoin. So we woke up to all these messages and whatnot. I looked at the reserve. The reserve was still full. Nothing had exited the reserve except for 2 small unwraps that were legitimate unwraps that just happened to take place in those same blocks. So the protocol did successfully identify like the wrong actor. So nothing left the reserve. We then that morning just kind of halted the unwraps. So like no one could then just in case, you always just want to like make sure that you halt everything so nothing can go wrong. Basically, people could always submit their unwraps, so we still saw those come in, and that was totally fine. But we weren't letting anything exit the protocol, which is kind of a best practice there. We then worked with Unisat and other companies that could have been potential off ramps, just to make sure everything, like all the indexer providers, we all sort of paused the indexing. And then within just a few hours, we were able to identify the exploit because we were able to basically track that transaction back up the chain, identify the exploit, find out that it was an accounting exploit, basically fix that, and then turn the indexer back on, just without those transactions having taken place because they were phantom transactions to begin with. And that allowed it for kind of everything just to go back to normal state. It did require, Unisat had a little bit of all the indexers had a little bit of downtime because they had to re-index a little bit. But at this point, everything's totally back to normal. It did spook the market a little bit, like 10 Bitcoin left in TVL. Obviously, things, something like that, of course it's going to spook the market. But fortunately, it was all handled properly. Subfrost did its job, which we were very, very happy about. But we are taking kind of additional steps here, even though everything was fine and nothing. It was actually a very inexpensive audit for us.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, but we are getting the whole protocol audited by Halborn at the end of next month, just to make sure that. Get their stamp of approval, because that matters to people, rightfully so. Their auditors are a big part of the industry. So,
scary, but also kind of, like a really good story came out of that. And you got free auditing, like you mentioned, probably better than an auditor could do if you're spending some time, months troubleshooting with AI on how to do these things. I want to talk about, and our interview's getting long, and that's actually pretty good. But the stables. You're in the US. What is on the radar for regulation that will matter to you and the Alkanes protocol and to Bitcoin?
So the primary, there are sort of two routes you can take with stables, and we are taking a third unique route with our own stable called frUSD. That should be released very soon here, actually. One route is that, like, if you're interacting with stable, I mean, just at this point, if you're going to utilize stables, like, people need to KYC, which we're not okay with. We are not going that route. The other route is that your protocol is just like heavily, what's the word? Like monitored, scrutinized by governing bodies, because they can always shut off your stable. Or there's another route that we can take, which is what we're doing, where we are utilizing for our Alkane frUSD, we're utilizing like curve pools, kind of 3-pool style, where people can go in with USDT or USDC, get frUSD on the other end. We actually take that, and we lock it in a LP position, a stable swap LP position of USDT, USDC. That position has less kind of governing positions around, which at this point we believe that we still file all the proper paperwork and things like that, obviously, but it's not like we have to KYC our customers. That's really where I think the world in a lot of ways is going when it comes to stables, is like the KYC stuff. Like, basically stables are just like your debit card, and like that's not what we believe in. So we're taking an approach that should allow us to like avoid the KYC stuff. With that said, in our iOS app and our Android app, we are planning to have a on-ramp and off-ramp only in the regulated countries. So it's going to be one of those features where like a user can decide to KYC and then they can off-ramp, on-ramp to USD, or they can choose not to KYC and then they just can't utilize the on-ramp, off-ramp. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to shut any customers out, but that's sort of the extent to which we are willing to say, okay, we will KYC people if they want to utilize something that the U.S. government says, hey, you must, we're not going to break any laws here, basically.
Where do you see the Subfrost protocol being in a year's time? What are your goals for the company and for the protocol?
Great question. So a few goals I've set is I want to have 10 entities running Alkanes indexers. Right now there are 5, but 4 of which are like public and we actually have on our website, so you can sort of see like at what block each of these indexers are. We need to expand that group. Like at this point, we've proven that the technology works. Obviously, Halborn will prove it works too, after we pay them for the audit. Well, we've already paid actually. So after the audit actually takes place. So the technology works, everything is secure. At that point, we will start to scale like how far we decentralize. Like the further you go in decentralization, the harder it is to then say like, hey, actually, we need to make this critical decision because of a security concern. So at this point, we are now there where we have no, security concerns. I'd say it's safe for us to say we are now out of beta officially. But what we're going to do now is it's time to decentralize as much as we possibly can. So that means people running the Alkanes, different entities running the Alkanes indexer. And it also means identifying those entities and having them run Subfrost nodes so that they can sign those transactions as well. So my primary goal is 10 Alkanes indexers. And I do think that a lot of those, because we make it very simple, those people can also start earning Subfrost fees if they just also run a Subfrost node. So I think that's the plan. I would like to have, at minimum, like 10 different entities that are really they believe in the ethos of decentralization. They won't fight us on it, and they will decide to kind of join the party now, knowing that in the future, like, this group will grow. So that from a decentralized standpoint, which that is my most kind of important sort of like why we were here to begin with thing. But then from a like product standpoint, we'll release FRUSD probably within the next 2 months. We'll be audited within the next 2 months as well. We will have an iOS app as well as an Android app. And our Chrome browser extension wallet actually is now live. We just haven't announced it yet because we're making like some UI tweaks essentially. But we'll have those 3 products along with our web app, and that will host everything from all of them. We'll host everything from swapping different Bitcoin native assets, at this point Alkanes, as well as hosting our vaults, like our Fire Vault, which has seen quite a bit of success, which is really exciting as well. That's kind of like a Olympus or OHM. Olympus is OHM. Like an Olympus inspired and improved is what I like to say. It's not a copy of Olympus DAO, but it does utilize some principles of Olympus DAO that were successful. That's our Fire Vault, and we have about 11 million of TVL in that at this point, which is exciting. We want to launch another vault, and then dxBTC as well. I think within the year we should have that out, which will be your liquid staking token of Bitcoin. I think the simplest kind of auxiliary to it is like LBTC, Lombards, except Lombards is just cross-chain, and this will be just on Bitcoin, not cross-chain.
Amazing. I really like it. I like your ethos, and I just wanted to say, Gabe, thanks for coming on today onto Pale Blue Nexus. I should have had a lot more crypto and Bitcoin interviewees. However, with the market, it kind of took us a little steam out of things, but I'm glad that you came on.
Yeah, hell yeah. I think let's do it again. I think, I mean, we're here no matter what. You can interview me in 5 years. I guarantee I'm sitting right here. Maybe just a different apartment. But please, always reach out. I'm always happy to talk about this. And thank you for the support, going back from the BIS days to now and everything. It's been great.
Thanks, Gabe. Where can people catch up with you?
You can find me on Twitter, Gabe_Subfrost. That's probably the best place.
Thanks, Gabe.